Tonight, inflation closing in.
We have the raging inflation, as bad, some would argue, as back in the late 70s, early 80s.
And the sticker shock at the grocery store and the pump won't be over anytime soon. Plus,
that would be the basis for further indictments.
A third person arraigned for lying to the FBI over the infamous STEELE dossier that led to claims of collusion between Russia and former President Trump. And a military mom surprises her 5th grade daughter at school months after a deployment overseas. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation.
Inflation settling in and here to stay. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm John Jessup.
Good evening, I'm Jenna Bratter. Inflation closing in on the U.S. economy. The current inflation rate now soaring above 6% in the U.S., and some experts say it could go even higher.
The cost of almost everything right now running its highest course in 30 years. And anxiety for families over putting food on the table is causing panic in the pantry. CBN's Brody Carter got a first-hand look at the hard work it takes to fight poverty and the power of the gospel amid the pandemic. Brody.
John, Jenna, there are clearly more people facing the question of how they will feed their families. That's because in 2020 alone, America's poverty rate grew by 3 million people.
What I've learned is a lot of people are only one paycheck away from not being able to put food on the table.
Inflation is driving up the price of most everything. Gas and energy top the list, rising nearly 50% compared to last year. Just in time for winter, and the cost of putting food on the table is also surging past 6%.
I need food for my family. You know why? Because the stores is very expensive, the food. My money is not enough.
Our food banks are seeing prices that are 2 to 3 times what they were just 9 months ago.
Households already struggling to pay for food now face an economy dealing with continuing COVID impact, supply chain issues, and labor shortages. Workers behind the scenes helped food banks feed 60 million Americans in 2020, the highest on record. Ryan Foltz with Operation Blessing says there's more to this poverty equation because, as the Bible says, man does not live by bread alone.
More food has been thrown at poverty, more money has been thrown at poverty, but yet poverty continues to increase exponentially. The food bank, some of the pastors have been red flagged from the food bank because they pray or they share the gospel. This is why we do what we do. It's a distinct difference.
Foltz adds, despite our pandemic problems, relying on God's hand should be our main focus during these uncertain times.
We use the food as a means to have a key to their heart, to be able to share with them and minister them the gospel and be able to pray with them, because we know that's the greater need.
Analysts warn the worst could be yet to come because a freezing winter might drive up energy prices more than predicted. Price gouging continuing at the pump and pandemic relief programs coming to an end. The White House, on the other hand, forecasts inflation will fall next year. Press Secretary Jen Psaki maintains the president's Build Back Better agenda will keep the economy from falling off a fiscal cliff. John, Jenna?
All right, CBN's Brody Carter. Thank you, Brody. We'll hear now Chairman of the FreedomWorks Task Force on Economic Revival, Stephen Moore. Stephen, welcome back. Let's just start right there. Is inflation here to stay, Stephen, or is this transitory, as the Biden administration and some economists seem to suggest?
Well, I love that last line that you guys just recited from Jen Psaki saying, if we want to solve inflation past the $4 trillion spending bill. I think anybody, even with a junior high school education, knows that if you print more money and borrow more money, trillions of dollars, that's going to make inflation worse, not better. And so this is kind of a laughable claim by the Biden administration. They have had the inflation problem wrong for 6 months now, and so has the Federal Reserve Board. They keep saying it's transitory, which means it's temporary. It's not temporary. It's getting worse every month. As you guys just reported, the inflation rate is up by 6.2%. But the wage gains are only up by 4%. So that means people are falling behind. And when people fall behind in real terms, the poverty rate increases. So the people are being hurt the most by the higher gasoline prices, the higher food prices, the higher car and travel prices. All of those things are affecting people at the bottom the most.
Yeah, on the Build Back Better plan, Steve, this is a quote from the president, a tweet. He says, not one, not two, not three, but 17 Nobel Prize-winning economists say that passing Build Back Better will ease inflationary pressure and lower costs for American families. Your reaction to that?
It's sad. It makes me sad that these economists have become so politicized. As I said earlier, it's just basic math. If you continue to borrow money and spend money that we don't have, that means the Fed has to print more money. As this flood of money is put into the economy, it means that prices rise. This is what third world countries do, right? Third world countries, when they get in a debt crisis, they just keep printing money. And we're getting perilously close to that. No, we have to kill this bill as the first step to containing inflation. I'll give you another example. You know, we're paying, our oil and gas production is down by 2 million barrels a day under Biden. That's $170 million a day that we're losing in terms of production, and that's about $50 billion a year. So these policies are having a dramatic negative effect on the amount of goods and services that we're producing. It's causing supply chain problems, and it's raising prices. And I don't know, how long is this going to last? I think we could see 6 more months of rising prices. I hope I'm wrong, but I don't see any strategy by the Biden administration to deal with inflation.
Steve, real quickly, if we can, in about 30 seconds, 4.4 million Americans quit their job in September, breaking the record set in August. Is this a result of the pandemic, or is it a little more complicated than that?
Well, when people leave jobs, that's oftentimes a good thing because it means they're looking for a better job and they're finding better jobs. So there are a lot of jobs open right now. There are 10 million. The problem is we're not getting the new workers into the workforce to replace them. That's causing real problems, again, especially for the small businesses of America that have really been hammered by these Biden policies.
All right. Stephen Moore with FreedomWorks, thank you so much for your time today and have a great weekend.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Steve. Good to see you.
You too.
And coming up, these familiar faces. Stay tuned for our Friday Faith Nation political panel. That's next. And welcome back. A third person was arraigned this week for lying to the FBI over the infamous STEELE dossier. The dossier was pretext for the claim that Donald Trump and his 2016 campaign colluded with Russia. One
of the questions now, will there be more indictments? CBN's Dale Hurd has the story.
The Russian analyst who helped create the STEELE dossier pled not guilty Wednesday to charges he repeatedly lied to the FBI. Igor Danchenko was the main source in former British spy Christopher Steele's now discredited dossier on Donald Trump's alleged ties to the Russians. Special counsel John Durham has already indicted Michael Sussman, a lawyer who worked for the Clinton campaign. Durham also secured a conviction against former FBI lawyer Kevin Kleinsmith. He altered an email used to obtain a FISA warrant to spy on then-Trump campaign foreign policy advisor Carter Page, claiming Page was a Russian agent. The claim was false. Who might be Durham's next targets? And how far up the ladder at the FBI or the Clinton campaign could the indictments go? Americans are used to these kinds of investigations never really going very far and not catching a big fish. But this time, it may be different. Someone who thinks many more indictments are coming is the former director of national intelligence in the Trump administration, John Ratcliffe.
But I give John Durham over 1,000 other documents that have not yet been declassified that I know include intelligence that goes specifically to this criminal activity that would be the basis for further indictments.
But former federal prosecutor Andrew McCarthy says he does not expect major figures to be indicted, only those who lied to the special counsel.
Not everything that's a political dirty trick or in the nature of abuse of power is necessarily a violation of the federal law, the federal criminal law, even if it's very serious.
The Durham probe is an embarrassment for some quarters of the media and the Democratic Party who used it to push a false narrative about Donald Trump for years. But House Intelligence Committee Chair Adam Schiff is not apologizing.
Let's not use that as a smokescreen to somehow shield Donald Trump's culpability for inviting Russia to help them in the election, which they did.
A name that shows up in the Sussman indictment is White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, who was a policy advisor to Hillary Clinton's 2016 campaign.
What we're seeing now is this multi-layer connection between the Clinton campaign and this scandal. And it seems very clear that Durham believes that this was basically a campaign effort to dupe the FBI, and the FBI fell for it.
And Turley indicates more indictments are likely. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
And here with us now for our Friday Faith Nation political panel, Julia Manchester, political reporter with The Hill, and David Brody, CBN News chief political analyst. Both welcome. Happy Friday. Let's start there. Another indictment in the Durham probe. The special counsel appointed to investigate the origins of the Russia investigation. David, to you first. How significant is this?
Well, it's interesting for sure. Significant, not yet. We're going to wait and see how, as Dale's report says, how high up the food chain we get here exactly. I'll be honest with you. I think people, when I say people, I'm talking about the American people. I'm talking about voters overall. I think they're done with all of this. I'm not talking about the MAGA folks. The MAGA folks will eat this up. But I think overall, this is just like, look, we get it. OK, the STEELE dossier was a big fake. Hillary Clinton and the DNC, this is what Trump has been saying all along, that they were all behind it. And this is exactly what we're finding out now. So, OK, great. Congratulations, Trump and MAGA. You were right. What does it really matter ultimately? We got inflation through the yin yang, up the wazoo. We've got so many problems in this country that you just wonder that, Trump can go around and send out a press release and say, congratulations, I was right all along. But so what? To what end exactly? I think we got bigger problems in America right now.
Well, from the Durham report to a development in another ongoing investigation here in Washington, former Trump White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows ignoring a congressional subpoena to appear before the January 6th Select Committee. Julia, could he follow in the footsteps of Steve Bannon and face contempt of Congress charges?
It's very possible. We actually saw within the last minute that Steve Bannon has been indicted for refusing to appear before the January 6th committee. So it's very possible. I think you're going to see a lot of drama play out on Capitol Hill over the Trump administration or former Trump administration officials, those in the former president's orbit who refused to appear before the court. But, going back to David's point, I thought it was very interesting because here we are talking about these two very different cases, the STEELE dossier and the saga around that. And then, of course, the January 6th committee. And I know this is something that we're very interested in Washington. And it's, there's a lot of people who would want to get to the bottom of both of these cases. But I think he's right. I think when you look at it through a voter's perspective right now, they're very they're focused on kitchen table issues, whether it's inflation, education, these sort of issues that impact them directly. I think these other stories that we've been talking about in Washington really reflect the Beltway media's kind of interest in all of this. And obviously it's important, but I'm fascinated to see how voters outside of the Beltway feel about everything that's happening as Congress has been really deadlocked over passing some of, Biden's legislation and such.
I want to say that I agree with Julia because she agrees with me.
You associate yourself with her comments about agreeing with you, right?
Exactly. Well, lastly, speaking of January 6th, one more question on that, Julia, for you. Last night, a federal appeals court put a temporary block on the release of White House documents related to the January 6th riots at the Capitol. Julia, where is this tit for tat over the House committee subpoenas heading? Do you have any sense?
Like I said, I think it's headed to more dramatics on Capitol Hill. Look, I think Democrats want to make a point about, the consequences that they want, the perpetrators of January 6th to face. And I think you are going to continue to see this very much play out. You've also, of course, seen some Republicans, namely Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger, really side with Democrats on this issue and the other Republicans on that January 6th committee as well. So it's not surprising that it's headed to this place. I think this is very much a game of tit for tat, like you said.
On a little bit of a related note, in a book interview with an ABC News reporter, Former President Trump is heard seeming to defend Trump supporters who are chanting, "Hang Mike Pence." David, there's really no way to spin how that sounds, is there?
No, there's not. As I now attempt to spin it. Just kidding. I'm not going to spin it. But look, look. If you listen to the first part of what he was saying, right? Jonathan Karl asked him specifically about Pence being in danger, and Trump immediately says, "No, he was in no danger. He was safe. I had assurances that he was safe." So in Trump's view, once again, not defending what he said, but in Trump's view, if Pence is okay, if Pence is safe, then we can move on to this kind of like larger discussion about what the crowd was up to that day. And once again, this is where Donald Trump gets into trouble. He all of a sudden becomes like an ABC political analyst. And he just wants to kind of dissect the situation like, well, you know, there were people there that really didn't like him a lot. And I can kind of understand that. And at the same time, and all of a sudden, he's like, you know, all of a sudden on ABC This Week, rather than the former president of the United States. And so this is where Trump gets tripped up, you know, and this is why his critics say he doesn't have that moral clarity that he should have. But this is Trump being Trump, where he just wants to have a big discussion rather than calling out something that should have been called out right in the moment.
Julia, this question for you. Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska has announced she will run for re-election. She voted to convict Donald Trump in his second impeachment trial and has repeatedly bumped heads with the former president. But Julia, is this a signal that Republicans who have spoken out against the former president are feeling more confident ahead of these midterms?
You know, I think it's possible. Look, Lisa Murkowski has a very strong base of support in Alaska. You know, she obviously has a long political history there, so she has that infrastructure built. That being said, though, it could very well be an uphill battle for her. It might not be, you know, an easy re-election bid for her, considering you have a lot of the pro-Trump MAGA base that are against lawmakers like Lisa Murkowski, for example. I thought it was interesting watching Virginia's governor's race, because obviously Glenn Youngkin, while he embraced his the endorsement from Donald Trump, he did not align himself with Donald Trump directly. He didn't appear with Donald Trump, and he, you know, doesn't really appear to be Trumpian in the way that maybe a Ron DeSantis would be described as Trumpian. So I think you're seeing some Republicans, and I'm not saying this is in the case of Lisa Murkowski, but some Republicans running in 2022 looking at that race and saying, maybe I don't need to be tied to Trump completely. We'll really have to see. I think Senate races and House district races are very different games outside of Virginia. So, you know, we'll have to see how the Trump factor plays in.
All right, David, Julia, we are plumb out of time. Thank you guys so much and have a great weekend. And we'll be back right after the break. Well, welcome back. The plight of a persecuted religious minority in China in the spotlight tonight. Hundreds of Uyghur Muslims and fellow protesters marched from the White House to the State Department. They're calling on the U.S. government to take stronger action to help end China's genocide of Uyghurs and Turkic people.
Today, countless millions of our people remain locked up in concentration camps, prisons, and slave labor camps. Many of them are being tortured, killed for their organs, raped, sterilized.
Uyghurs have sought independence from Beijing for years. Critics, though, point to the Chinese government's steady persecution, sending millions of Uyghurs to concentration camps, which China calls re-education camps. And joining us now is the woman that you see on the screen, Ariel Del Turco, Assistant Director of the Center for Religious Liberty at Family Research Center. A first order of business, I want to make sure I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Is it Ariel or Ariel? My apologies.
Ariel.
Ariel, thank you, Ariel, for being with us. So first off, can you help us get a better understanding of what we're talking about? Can you describe the dire situation Uyghurs and those in that area that call it East Turkestan face today under control of the Chinese government?
Yes, well, the Chinese government refers to it as Xinjiang. It's a northwest province populated mostly by the Uyghur people, and they are an ethnic minority as well as a religious Muslim minority who have long been persecuted by the Chinese government. But in 2017, they actually started to ramp up their persecution of Uyghurs, creating large internment camps. And today, there's up to 1 to 3 million Uyghurs detained in these camps, and they can get thrown in there for just about everything, for growing a beard, for being caught with Quran apps on your phone, for having too many children. The list is almost endless. So it's no wonder that Uyghurs in America are frustrated that this is happening, even today, to their fellow Uyghurs in China.
Yeah, it does appear they are getting more and more vocal. Ariel, what can the U.S. do to help the Uyghurs and the Turkic people in China?
Well, in January, Secretary of State Pompeo actually declared that there is an ongoing genocide against the Uyghur people, and they determined that based on the Chinese government's widespread forced sterilization and forced abortion of Uyghur women. So this places a large responsibility on the United States to do something. So for starters, Congress can pass the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act. This act would prevent items made with forced labor in Xinjiang from entering the United States. And this is actually a way to cut off the Chinese government's ability to profit off of their human rights violations, because these Uyghurs held in these internment camps are not just detained, but they're then used as a source of forced labor for either very cheap or for free. So we need to be cutting off the source of income based on China's oppression.
Ariel, we only have a few seconds left. Uyghurs are calling on the United States to expedite asylum cases. How important would that change be? Again, in just a few seconds.
This is very important. China allows very few Uyghurs to get out of the country, but once they are out, they need protection from repatriation to China, and they need to be assimilated into U.S. culture, which they typically love. They appreciate America's freedom and for the voice of the United States government speaking up on their behalf.
All right, Ariel Del Turco with the Family Research Council. It's good to have you this evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Coming up, a military homecoming just in time for the holidays. Stick around for this heartwarming surprise. Next.
And finally tonight, a surprise of a lifetime. An Arizona 5th grader received an early Christmas present this week when her mom showed up at school.
Army Staff Sergeant Madeline Perez surprised her daughter after serving several months overseas. Met at first with a double take and then lots of tears. Perez didn't come empty-handed carrying balloons and treats. She quickly made her room to hug her daughter, who she hadn't seen since January. Perez said it's heartbreaking being away from family, but she's thankful her daughter has her family support and that the holidays will be even sweeter now. What a great reunion. Look at that. Thank you so much for watching Faith Nation.
Have a great night.